Something is wrong with this man. You can see it immediately. He is sitting at a table, calm, well-dressed, completely lucid. He speaks clearly. He reasons clearly. He looks at you with the full, present attention of someone entirely in the room. And then, mid-conversation, something shifts. Not dramatically, not with any outward sign of distress. He simply resets, like a page refreshing. He looks at you with the same open, friendly expression he had 30 seconds ago, and asks, with complete sincerity, whether the two of you have met before. You have, many times, hundreds of times. You have been meeting this man every single day for 3 years. And every morning he sits down across from you, extends his hand, and introduces himself as though you are a stranger. His name is Clive Wearing, and what happened to his brain is already strange enough to hold your attention for the next 20 minutes. But here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. The strange part is not what he lost. The strange part, the part that shook neuroscience to its foundations, the part that nobody saw coming, is what he kept. Before the forgetting, Clive Wearing was a man fully, completely alive in his own life, intellectually sharp, professionally respected, a person who engaged with the world with genuine depth and curiosity. And at the center of everything, a marriage. His wife, Deborah, by every account from everyone who knew them, not just a partnership but the organizing fact of his entire emotional world, the person around whom everything else in his life arranged itself. In the spring of 1985, a virus entered his brain. It moved with a speed and precision that still disturbs the researchers who studied it. Within days, it had found and destroyed the hippocampus, a small, curved structure buried deep in the brain that serves as a gateway through which new experiences pass on their way to becoming permanent memory. The damage was catastrophic, and when Clive woke up on the other side of it, he woke up in a world that would not hold. Every new moment arrived, vivid, clear, completely real, and then dissolved before it could attach to anything, before it could become the past, before it could become part of the continuous story that makes a life feel like a life. He woke up in 1985, and in a very specific, very clinical, very undeniable sense, he is still waking up there now. But here's the question I want you to carry into everything that follows. If a man loses access to his entire past, if every memory, every experience, every piece of evidence of who he is gets stripped away, what is left? Is there anything left? Or does the self simply go with it? Clive kept a diary. Not because anyone instructed him to. The impulse to record, to mark his own existence, to leave some evidence that he had been present and conscious, that was intact. So he wrote, and the diary became something no one expected. Page after page after page. Dozens of entries. Hundreds. All of them recording the same discovery. The same urgent, certain, freshly felt realization that he had just woken up, that he was conscious for the first time, that before this particular moment, there had been absolutely nothing. He would write the entry. Minutes later, he would read it back, cross it out, right beneath it, in the same handwriting, with the same certainty that the previous entry was wrong. That now was the real first moment. That before now, nothing. Then he would cross that out too. You can hold this diary. It exists. Pages and pages of a man trying to anchor himself in a world that will not anchor, each attempt erased by the next, stretching back through weeks and months of identical handwriting, making identical discoveries, unable to see that the proof of the very thing he is trying to deny is written in his own hand on every page above. Now, here's what I need to tell you. This is only the beginning of what is strange about Clive Wearing, because something happened when Deborah walked into the room, something that none of the researchers could fully explain. Something that, once you understand it, changes the way you think about memory, about love, and about what a human being actually is. Every time Deborah entered the room, and she entered many rooms, many times, across many years, Clive's face did something that it did for no one and nothing else. Not a polite acknowledgement, not the social warmth of a friendly man greeting a visitor. Something involuntary, something that came from somewhere below the level of decision. He would reach for her, hold her with a specificity, a tenderness that was unmistakably, entirely about her and no one else, that cannot be explained by the fact that she had just walked in and seemed kind. This was not a man responding warmly to a stranger. This was a man responding to someone his entire system knew. He could not tell you how long they had been married, could not describe a single day they had shared, a single place they had been together, a single moment from the life they had built. Every explicit piece of evidence for why he loved her was gone. Every memory that might justify the feeling, erased. And yet the feeling was there. Specific, consistent, directed entirely and precisely at her. Every time she left and came back, even if she had only been gone for 3 minutes, which for Clive represented an entire lifetime of nothingness, it was a reunion. Real, unperformed. The relief and joy of seeing her arrive fresh every single time, across 3 decades, without a single exception. And here is a question that this raises. The question that kept researchers up at night. The question that I want you to hold very carefully as we move forward. How do you love someone you cannot remember? How does a feeling survive the complete destruction of every reason for it? The answer to that question is going to require us to dismantle something you have probably believed about yourself your entire life. Memory is not one thing. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It took decades of research, multiple patients, hundreds of studies, and the lived experience of people like Clive Wearing to force neuroscience to accept it. Because for most of the 20th century, memory was treated as a single system. A unified process. You experience something. It gets stored. You retrieve it later. One mechanism. One location. One fragile thread connecting you to your past. That model is wrong. Memory is not one system. It is many. Each one handling a completely different kind of information. Each one stored in completely different brain structures. Each one capable of surviving completely independently when everything else is destroyed. What Clive lost was one specific kind. The kind researchers call episodic memory, the memory of events, of moments, of things that happen to you specifically in specific places at specific points in your life. The memory that lets you say, I was there, that was real, I remember it happening to me. The memory that strings moments together into the experience of having a continuous past. This is what lives in the hippocampus. And this is what the virus took. But there are other kinds of memory. And they live somewhere else entirely. And this is where the story of Clive Wearing stops being a tragedy about one man and becomes something that reaches directly into your life, your sense of who you are, and the way you understand almost everyone you have ever loved. There is a form of memory that does not feel like memory at all. It does not arrive as a recollection. It does not produce images or stories or the sense of having been somewhere. It shows up not as a thought but as an ability. Not as I remember but as I know how. You do not remember how to walk. You simply walk. You do not remember how to read. You simply read. You do not remember how to navigate the street you have lived on for 10 years. You just know which way to turn. This is procedural memory, and it lives not in the hippocampus but in older, deeper, more primitive brain structures. Structures that handle the relationship between intention and movement, between practice and capability. Structures that the virus never touched. Clive retained this entirely. Things he had done thousands of times, tasks requiring skill, precision, practice, attention, he could still do, with the full competence of someone who had spent years developing those abilities, because those years were still in him, not as recollections, as capabilities. The learning had been done, and it had been stored somewhere that episodic memory could not reach, and therefore somewhere that the destruction of episodic memory could not erase. He had not remembered how to do these things. He had simply never stopped being able to do them. But here's the part that truly matters. The part that connects us back to Deborah. Back to the love that had no memory supporting it. Back to the question of how a feeling survived the destruction of every reason for it. Because procedural memory is not the only kind that lives outside the hippocampus. There is another kind. And this one is the one that changes everything. There is a form of memory that researchers have struggled to name precisely because it does not produce recollections and does not feel like knowing how to do something. It lives in an entirely different register. It lives in feeling, the body's accumulated response to the world. The nervous system's learned reactions to people and places and presences it has encountered across years, encoded not as narrative, not as procedure, but as sensation, as a particular quality of ease that arrives in certain rooms, as a specific feeling of safety in certain company, as a response that comes before the mind has processed anything, the thing that happens in the chest before the brain has caught up, This is what Clive still had. His nervous system had spent years in Deborah's presence, learning her, not consciously, not in a way that could be retrieved or articulated, but in the deep structural way that the body learns everything it learns through long exposure. The particular signal of her presence had been encoded into him at a level that had nothing to do with the hippocampus, nothing to do with episodic memory, nothing to do with the ability to recall any specific moment of their shared life. It was in him the way all deeply learned things are in us, not stored somewhere retrievable, distributed throughout the entire architecture of who he had become. And when she walked through the door, his whole system recognized her, not with a conscious recognition of "I know who you are and here is why," with something older than that, deeper than that, something that required no evidence because it was not a conclusion. It was a response. Now hold this thought carefully, because I want to show you one more piece of this puzzle before we bring it all together. One more man, one more case, one that reveals something about your memory that you are almost certainly not going to be comfortable with. Across the Atlantic, decades before Clive Wearing, a young man underwent surgery to treat severe epilepsy. The surgeon removed significant portions of both hippocampi, the structures on both sides of the brain responsible for turning experience into lasting memory. The seizure stopped, and the young man, known in research literature for 50 years only by the initials HM, woke into a world that, like Clive's, would not accumulate. Every day reset. Every person was a stranger regardless of how many times they had met. Every experience vanished before it could become the past. And then the researchers gave him a puzzle. The same puzzle, every day, for weeks. A task requiring a specific learned skill, practiced and refined across multiple sessions. He had no memory of ever having done it before. No memory of sitting at this table, looking at this puzzle, working through this problem. As far as his conscious experience was concerned, each session was a first. And yet, he got better. Every single day. Measurably, verifiably, consistently better. His performance improved across sessions he had no access to, no knowledge of, no memory of having experienced. His hands learned even when his mind could not. The skill accumulated in him through a channel that bypassed episodic memory entirely, and that channel was invisible to him, completely inaccessible to his conscious experience, and completely intact. Every day he sat down to this puzzle he had never seen before, and his hands moved with a quiet, unearned confidence of someone who had done this many times. Now here's what I want you to really sit with. If HM was learning things he had no memory of learning, if knowledge was accumulating in him through a channel he could not access or observe, then the same thing is happening in you. Right now, every day, constantly, you are carrying knowledge you did not consciously acquire, running on learning you cannot retrieve, being shaped by experiences that left no retrievable memory behind. And the person you are today, the way you move through the world, the responses that feel most natural, the instincts that arrive before you had decided anything, is the result of all of it. You are not only what you remember, you are everything you have ever been through, whether you can access it or not. And this leads us to the thing that is most uncomfortable about everything we have covered so far. The memories you trust most are not necessarily true. I do not mean this casually. I mean it in a precise, documented, experimentally verified way that has been demonstrated repeatedly under controlled conditions. Episodic memory, the vivid, emotionally loaded, personally felt memory of things that happened to you, feels like a recording. When you remember something clearly, the clarity itself seems to be evidence of accuracy. The detail, the color, the way it feels like you are almost back there, none of that is how episodic memory actually works. Every time you retrieve a memory, you are not playing back a file. You are reconstructing it, assembling it from fragments, filling in gaps, often without any awareness that you are filling in gaps with what makes sense based on who you are now, what you believe now, how you understand yourself and the world now. The memory is rebuilt slightly differently each time, shaped by the person doing the rebuilding, and then stored again, not in its original form, but in its rebuilt form, ready to be retrieved and rebuilt again next time. This means your memories have been changing every time you have accessed them, for your entire life, without your knowledge, without your consent, without any sensation of editing. The moments you are most certain about, the ones that feel most vivid and most reliable, are the ones you have retrieved most often, and therefore the ones that have been rebuilt the most times. which means they may be the furthest from what actually occurred. The story you tell about your own life, the version of events that feels most real, most fundamental, most essentially true, is, in important ways, a creative work. Not a lie, not a fabrication, but an ongoing interpretation, assembled and reassembled across years by a brain that is always trying to make sense of what happened. You are not who you remember being. You are who the act of remembering has built you to be. And now, with all of this in your mind, let's go back to Deborah walking through the door. For nearly 4 decades, she visited Clive, regularly, carrying the memory of their life together in a way he could not, being the continuous thread of a relationship that existed, for him, only in the present tense. Sitting with a man who could not remember a single day they had shared, and watching him reach for her, every time, as though she was the only solid thing in a world made entirely of water. Researchers tried for years to find the right vocabulary for what Clive's love for Deborah represents. It is not remembering. The word does not fit. There is no recollection, no retrieval, no accessing of stored information. It is not conscious recognition, not in the sense of I know who you are and here's the evidence for that. It is not supported by any story he can tell, any moment he can point to, any piece of verifiable shared history. The best description anyone has been able to find is this. It is the body's knowledge of someone, the nervous system's accumulated response to one specific human presence, built over years of proximity and care and the experience of being loved by one particular person, encoded not into episodic memory but into the deep structural responses of the body itself, into something that has no retrievable content but is completely real, completely consistent, completely immune to the destruction of the system that was supposed to be keeping it alive. And what this means, what this insists, quietly across 40 years of Deborah walking through that door, is that love at its deepest is not a story. We treat it as one. We tell the story of how it began, how it grew, what it survived. We carry the narrative as though the narrative is what makes it real. As though without the story, the love would have no legs to stand on. Clive Wearing has no story. He cannot tell it. He cannot remember any of it, and the love is completely intact, which means underneath the story, there's always been something else. Something that does not need the story to justify it or sustain it or keep it breathing. Something that lives in an entirely different place, in the body, in the nervous system, in the part of us that respond before we have decided how to respond. The story is how we explain love. It is not what love is made of. And Clive Wearing, who cannot remember yesterday, who wakes up every morning in 1985, who has been living without a past for nearly 4 decades, has been proving this every single time Deborah walks through the door. In the final years of research into advanced memory loss, scientists working with patients in the late stages of Alzheimer's disease noticed something small and strange. These patients had lost the ability to recognize family members, had no access to any episodic memories of their own lives, could not name their children, could not recognize their spouses, had no retrievable content from decades of relationships built through love and time and shared experience. And yet, in the presence of people who had loved them for years, something in the body still responded differently than it did to strangers. Not with recognition, not with naming, but with a settling, a quality of ease, a turning toward that was not present with people encountered for the first time. The familiarity had outlasted every memory of its source. The body still knew the people the mind had completely forgotten. And in every one of these cases, the response was not random. It was directed, specific. The nervous system was not simply relaxing in pleasant company. It was responding to someone in particular, someone it had known for so long and so deeply that the knowing had become structural, woven into the body itself. The mind forgets. The body, it seems, does not. So here's a question. The real one. The one this entire story has been building toward. If you lost access to every memory you carry, every specific event, every story, every piece of evidence for who you are and how you became this person, what would remain? Not what you would remember. What would remain? What has your body learned that your mind never consciously taught it? What loves are encoded in your nervous system that have nothing to do with the history you can retrieve? What have you actually become underneath the biography you carry? Underneath the story you tell about yourself, underneath the version of events that feels most essentially true. These are not comfortable questions, but they are honest ones. And Clive Wearing, who has been living inside them without the luxury of treating them as philosophical, who cannot put them down and walk away, who cannot reach for the memories that might make them easier to hold, has been answering them quietly every single day, not with words, with a face that changes when a specific person walks through the door, with hands that reach for someone his mind cannot remember but his body has never forgotten, with a particular quality of being entirely present, entirely himself, in the company of the one person his nervous system knows. That is the answer. The one that survived everything. Not what he remembered, who he loved. And maybe that is what we actually are. Not the sum of what we can retrieve. Not the story we have assembled about ourselves from the pieces of a life we half remember. Not the biography we carry like evidence of our own existence. Maybe we are what accumulates in the body while the mind is busy making stories. The responses, the recognitions, the love that needs no evidence because it is not a conclusion, it is a state. The knowledge that lives in the hands, in the nervous system, in the particular way the whole body orients itself toward the people and things it has quietly, structurally, irreversibly learned to love. Clive Wearing cannot tell you who he is. He has not been able to for 40 years. But when Deborah walks through the door, he knows. And perhaps that kind of knowing, the kind that lives below memory, below story, below everything that can be taken, is not the consolation prize of a damaged mind. Perhaps it is the thing that was always most real. The part of us that was never, truly, in the storage system to begin with. If this story left something in you, a question, a shift, an unsettling feeling that the world is slightly different than it was 20 minutes ago, that is exactly what this channel is here for. We go looking for the stories that change the way you see things. The ones hiding underneath the surface of the ordinary world, waiting for someone to look closely enough. If that is why you are here, subscribe. It is free. It takes 2 seconds. And it means we can keep making these. Leave us a comment before you go. Tell us what landed. Tell us what you are thinking about now that you were not thinking about before you press play. Tell us what question you are leaving with. We read every single one. And this is one of those videos where we genuinely cannot wait to see what you say.